Have you ever paused in the middle of a dream, a goal, or even a simple decision, and felt an invisible hand holding you back? That hand, quiet, subtle, and persistent, is fear. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, creeping into your mind with thoughts like, "What if I fail?" or "I'm not good enough." And before you know it, your life has shifted, not because the world told you to stop, but because fear quietly drew the boundaries you now live within. Fear is one of the most underestimated forces in our lives. It is invisible, yet its influence is profound. It shapes our choices, limits our potential, and convinces us that comfort is safety, even when comfort is stagnation. You may not realize it, but fear often guides your path, keeping you in familiar routines, repeating patterns, and safe spaces that feel secure but leave your soul restless. The dreams you've tucked away, the passions you've postponed, the bold actions you've avoided, they all have one thing in common: fear and doubt standing in the shadows, waiting for you to hesitate. But here's the truth that this audiobook will reveal. Fear is not undefeatable. Doubt is not permanent. You do not have to be a prisoner to the quiet voice that says, "You can't." In fact, understanding fear is the first step toward breaking its hold. When we confront fear directly, name it, and study its patterns, it loses its power. When we challenge doubt with small, consistent actions, confidence begins to rise. And when we choose courage, even in tiny moments, life begins to unfold in ways we never imagined. Fearless living, breaking the chains of fear and doubt, is more than just a book. It is a journey. It will take you deep into the mechanisms of fear, exploring how it infiltrates your thoughts, decisions, and relationships. You'll uncover how self-doubt quietly shapes your identity and prevents you from stepping into the life you were meant to lead. You'll hear stories of ordinary people who transformed their lives by refusing to let fear dictate their choices. And most importantly, you'll gain practical, actionable strategies that allow you to build courage, strengthen self-belief, and step forward into the unknown with confidence. Imagine what it would feel like to wake up each day without fear controlling your decisions, to approach life with curiosity instead of hesitation, to take bold steps toward your dreams, knowing that failure is not the end but a teacher. This book will guide you to that place. It will show you how to recognize the invisible chains of fear, loosen them, and eventually break free. You will learn that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite it. And in that courage, you will find the life you have been longing for, a life of possibility, growth, and freedom. As you listen, let yourself imagine a life where fear is no longer the silent driver of your choices. Picture yourself speaking up without hesitation, taking risks without paralyzing doubt, and embracing opportunities that once seemed impossible. That life is not a distant fantasy. It is a reality waiting for you to step into, and this audiobook is your first step toward it. By the time you finish this journey, you won't just understand fear. You will know how to rise above it. You will carry the tools to transform self-doubt into self-belief, hesitation into action, and limitation into possibility. The life you've been dreaming of is on the other side of fear, and the courage to reach it is already within you. This is your invitation. Step forward, break the chains, live fearlessly. Welcome to Limitless Listening, your sanctuary for inspiration, personal growth, and life-changing ideas. Here, we bring the wisdom of motivational and personal development books directly to your ears, carefully crafted into immersive audiobooks that guide you toward your best self. Whether you are driving to work, relaxing at home, or simply seeking a moment of focus, this channel is designed to help you pause, reflect, and transform. Our goal is simple: to give you the tools, stories, and insights that ignite your inner drive, strengthen your courage, and empower you to take action in every area of your life. So take a deep breath, find a comfortable space, allow yourself to be fully present as you listen to this audiobook. Absorb the lessons, feel the emotions, and let the stories guide you toward meaningful change. With every chapter, you'll discover practical strategies and inspiring examples that will encourage you to push past fear, silence self-doubt, and live a life filled with confidence and possibility. This is Limitless Listening, where your journey to fearless living begins. Chapter 1: The Invisible Chains of Fear. Fear is one of the most powerful forces in the human mind. It shapes decisions, limits potential, and silently controls the direction of countless lives. Unlike physical chains that can be seen and broken, fear often operates invisibly. It whispers doubts, magnifies risks, and convinces people to remain exactly where they are. Most people do not even realize they are living inside these invisible chains. From the outside, their lives may look normal. They go to work, follow routines, and appear stable. But deep inside, many dreams remain untouched. Many ideas remain unspoken, and many opportunities pass by simply because fear quietly says, "What if it goes wrong?" Fear does not always appear as panic or terror. Often it disguises itself as logic, caution, or practicality. It says, "Now is not the right time. You are not ready yet. What will people think? What if you fail?" These thoughts feel reasonable, but over time they build a mental prison. Every postponed action adds another link to the chain. Fear is deeply rooted in human psychology. For thousands of years, it served a critical survival purpose. Fear protected humans from danger, predators, natural disasters, and life-threatening risks. It triggered the fight-or-flight response, helping people react quickly to threats. But the modern world has changed faster than our instincts. Today, most fears are not about survival. They are about judgment, uncertainty, embarrassment, or failure. The brain reacts to these situations almost the same way it reacts to physical danger. Speaking in public can feel like standing in front of a predator. Starting a business can feel like jumping into a storm. Trying something new can feel like stepping into the unknown wilderness. The body releases stress hormones, the heart races, and the mind searches for ways to escape the discomfort. The easiest escape is simple: do nothing. Whole new. At first, avoiding fear feels like relief. You stay safe, comfortable, and protected from potential failure. But safety has a hidden price. Every time a person chooses comfort over growth, their world becomes a little smaller. Opportunities shrink, confidence weakens, dreams begin to feel unrealistic. Over years, this pattern quietly shapes a life of limitation. Many people reach a point where they look back and wonder why they never tried the things they once imagined. The tragedy is not failure. It is the fear of failure that prevented action in the first place. Failure teaches. Fear freezes. One leads to growth. The other leads to regret. One of the most important truths about fear is that it is often exaggerated by the mind. The brain constantly predicts worst-case scenarios. You will embarrass yourself. People will judge you. You will lose money. Everything will collapse. Yet reality rarely unfolds as dramatically as the mind imagines. In fact, most fears lose their power the moment action begins. The presentation becomes manageable. The conversation becomes easier. The first step of a new journey becomes less frightening than the endless thinking that came before it. Fear thrives in imagination but weakens in action. Among all fears, one of the most restrictive is the fear of what others think. Humans are social beings. Acceptance from others has always been important for survival and belonging. But in modern society, this natural instinct often becomes excessive. People hesitate to share ideas because they fear criticism. They avoid pursuing passions because they fear being misunderstood. They stay silent because they fear standing out. Ironically, most people are far too focused on their own lives to analyze someone else's choices in detail. The judgment we imagine is often far greater than the judgment that actually exists. Living under the constant weight of other people's opinions is one of the strongest invisible chains a person can carry. The comfort zone is not always comfortable. It is simply familiar. Even when a situation is frustrating or limiting, familiarity creates a sense of security. The brain prefers predictable discomfort over unpredictable change. This is why people stay in jobs they dislike, postpone goals for years, and delay important decisions. The unknown feels threatening, even when it holds the possibility of growth, opportunity, and transformation. Breaking out of this cycle requires a simple but powerful shift: choosing progress over certainty. The first step to breaking any chain is recognizing that it exists. Fear often hides behind excuses, distractions, and delays. It disguises itself as waiting for the perfect time, doing more research, or being realistic. But progress rarely comes from perfect conditions. It comes from imperfect action. Every person who has ever achieved something meaningful has faced fear. The difference is not that they were fearless. It is that they chose to move forward despite fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else is more important than fear. When a person begins to see fear clearly, something powerful happens. The invisible chains begin to weaken. The voice that once said "you can't" slowly loses authority. New questions appear. What if this works? What if I learn something valuable? What if this is the opportunity I have been waiting for? Every small act of courage breaks another link in the chain. Freedom from fear does not happen in a single moment. It happens through repeated choices, choosing growth over comfort, action over hesitation, and possibility over doubt. The journey toward discipline, resilience, and success begins with this realization. Fear may be powerful, but it only controls those who obey it. Chapter 2: Understanding the Voice of Doubt. Every human being carries an internal voice. It speaks constantly, commenting on decisions, predicting outcomes, and evaluating possibilities. Sometimes this voice encourages growth and confidence, but very often it does something else. It whispers doubt. Doubt is subtle. It rarely shouts. Instead, it quietly questions your abilities, your readiness, and your chances of success. Are you sure you can do this? What if you fail? Maybe you're not good enough. These thoughts can feel so natural that people assume they are simply being realistic. But the voice of doubt is rarely objective. More often, it is a mixture of past experiences, fear of judgment, and the brain's natural desire to avoid risk. Understanding this voice is the first step toward weakening its influence. Self-doubt is not a sign of weakness. In fact, it is a nearly universal human experience. Even the most successful individuals in the world have faced moments where they questioned themselves. The difference lies in how people respond to doubt. Some people treat doubt as a warning sign that they should stop immediately. Others treat it as a signal that they are stepping into something meaningful and challenging. The voice of doubt usually appears when a person is about to leave their comfort zone. It emerges when you try something new, pursue a bigger goal, or put yourself in a position where failure is possible. In this sense, doubt is not always an enemy. Sometimes it simply means you are growing. However, when doubt becomes constant and overwhelming, it can paralyze progress. It can convince people to abandon ideas before they even try. The voice of doubt is shaped by several powerful influences. One of the strongest influences is past experience. If someone has failed before, the mind stores that memory as a warning. The brain tries to protect the person from repeating the same pain. As a result, whenever a similar situation appears, the mind quickly recalls the previous failure. Another source of doubt is social conditioning. From childhood, people hear countless messages about what is possible and what is not. Teachers, family members, peers, and society often place limits, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. A child who hears "be realistic" too often may eventually interpret ambition as risk. Doubt can also grow from comparison. In the modern world, people constantly compare their lives with the achievements of others. Social media amplifies this effect, showing the highlights of other people's success while hiding their struggles. When someone sees others who appear more talented, more successful, or more confident, the voice of doubt quickly responds, "You're not like them." Over time, these influences combine to form a powerful internal narrative. Doubt quickly responds, "You're not like them." Over time, these influences combine to form a powerful internal narrative. Another reason doubt feels so convincing is the brain's natural bias toward negative information. Psychologists have long observed that negative experiences tend to have a stronger impact on the mind than positive ones. A single criticism can outweigh many compliments. One failure can overshadow multiple successes. This tendency developed for survival. Early humans needed to remember dangers more strongly than pleasant experiences. Forgetting where food was located was inconvenient, but forgetting where a predator lurked could be fatal. Although modern life is very different, the brain still follows this ancient pattern. When you attempt something new, the mind instinctively scans for potential problems and worst-case scenarios. It highlights risks more than opportunities. This protective instinct once helped humans survive, but today it often holds them back. Doubt becomes powerful when it turns into a story. The human mind constantly creates narratives to explain events. When something goes wrong, people rarely view it as a single isolated incident. Instead, they build conclusions about themselves. A failed exam becomes, "I'm not smart enough." A rejected idea becomes, "My ideas are never good." A business setback becomes, "I'm not meant for success." These stories gradually shape identity. Once a person begins to believe these narratives, they start acting according to them. Opportunities are ignored, effort decreases, confidence fades. Eventually, the story becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. What began as one moment of doubt evolves into a permanent belief. One of the most important lessons about doubt is that it is not the same as truth. The voice in your mind is not always accurate. It is simply a collection of assumptions, memories, fears, and predictions. Imagine a person who hesitates before speaking in a meeting. Their mind might say, "Everyone will think your idea is stupid." But how often does this prediction actually come true? In reality, most people in the room are too focused on their own thoughts to judge someone else harshly. Even if the idea is imperfect, it may spark discussion or improvement. The doubt predicted humiliation. Reality offered learning. This gap between imagined outcomes and real outcomes is where courage lives. The voice of doubt often follows predictable patterns. It exaggerates risks while minimizing strengths. It focuses on past failures rather than past progress. It assumes the worst possible interpretation of events. For example, if someone sends a proposal and receives no immediate reply, doubt might say, "They hated it." In truth, there may be dozens of other explanations. The person may be busy, distracted, or simply waiting to respond later. But the doubtful mind prefers dramatic conclusions. Recognizing this pattern is powerful. Once you start observing how doubt operates, it begins to lose its authority. Another hidden driver of doubt is perfectionism. Perfectionism creates unrealistic expectations. It convinces people that anything less than perfect is unacceptable. As a result, many individuals delay action indefinitely while waiting for the ideal moment, the ideal plan, or the ideal level of skill. But perfection is rarely the path to success. Most achievements in life come through experimentation, mistakes, and continuous improvement. The first attempt is rarely perfect, and it does not need to be. When perfection becomes the standard, doubt becomes inevitable. The mind says, if it cannot be perfect, it should not be done. This belief quietly stops progress before it even begins. One of the most effective ways to deal with doubt is to challenge it. Instead of accepting doubtful thoughts as truth, treat them like hypotheses that need evidence. If the mind says, you will fail, ask yourself, what proof supports this claim? What proof contradicts it? Have I succeeded at difficult things before? Often, the evidence reveals that doubt is based more on emotion than reality. Another useful approach is to ask a different question entirely. What would I do if I were not afraid? This simple question shifts the focus from limitation to possibility. Silencing doubt completely is neither realistic nor necessary. The goal is not to eliminate the voice of doubt, but to develop a stronger voice alongside it, the voice of reason, courage, and determination. This stronger voice reminds you of your abilities. It acknowledges fear but refuses to be controlled by it. Developing this voice takes practice. It grows through small acts of confidence. Speaking up once, trying something new, finishing a difficult task, or learning from a mistake. Each experience becomes evidence that challenges the story of doubt. Over time, the internal dialogue begins to change. Instead of saying, you can't do this, the mind starts saying, you might struggle, but you can figure it out. This shift is subtle but powerful. Perhaps the most effective way to weaken doubt is through action. Doubt thrives in stillness. The longer a person thinks without acting, the more space doubt has to grow. Action interrupts this cycle. Taking even a small step creates new information. It replaces speculation with experience. Once action begins, the mind must adapt to reality rather than imagination. A person who starts writing a book moves from wondering, can I write, to discovering, I can improve with practice. A person who launches a small project moves from what if it fails to now I know what works and what doesn't. Progress replaces uncertainty. One of the most liberating realizations is that doubt never fully disappears, even for successful people. Entrepreneurs doubt new ventures, artists doubt new creations, leaders doubt major decisions, but they move forward anyway. They understand that uncertainty is part of growth. Instead of waiting for complete confidence, they act with partial confidence. They accept that mistakes are inevitable and learning is continuous. In this way, doubt becomes less of a barrier and more of a companion on the journey. Doubt can also become a source of motivation. When someone hears an internal voice saying, you can't do this, they can choose to interpret it differently. Rather than seeing it as a command to stop, they can treat it as a challenge to prove the voice wrong. Many achievements in history were driven by people who refused to accept the limitations others placed on them, including the limitations of their own doubts. Every time you move forward, despite uncertainty, you weaken the authority of doubt. Every time you try again after a mistake, you strengthen resilience. The struggle between confidence and doubt happens inside every person. It is an invisible battle that shapes the direction of lives. Some people allow doubt to control their decisions. They wait for perfect certainty that never arrives. Others learn to acknowledge doubt without obeying it. They recognize the voice but refuse to give it the final word. This difference may appear small, but over years, it creates dramatically different outcomes. One life becomes defined by hesitation, the other becomes defined by growth. At the end of the day, doubt is simply a voice. It is not destiny. You cannot always control the thoughts that appear in your mind, but you can control how much authority those thoughts receive. You can listen to doubt, consider its warnings, and still choose to act. You can recognize fear and still move forward. You can question the stories your mind creates and write new ones through experience. The voice of doubt will likely always exist, but it does not have to lead. The moment you begin to understand it, challenge it, and move beyond it, you take the first real step toward mastering your own mind. And when that happens, the chains of fear begin to loosen even further, opening the path toward discipline, resilience, and lasting success. Chapter 3: How Fear Shapes Our Decisions. Every day, people make hundreds of decisions. Some are small and routine. What to eat, what to wear, what task to start first. Others are far more significant. What career to pursue, whether to start a business, whether to speak up about an idea, or whether to take a risk that could change the direction of life. Although these decisions often appear logical on the surface, many of them are quietly influenced by one powerful emotion: fear. Fear does not always appear as panic or anxiety. Often it hides beneath rational explanations and cautious reasoning. It disguises itself as practicality, safety, and responsibility. Yet behind many of these decisions lies a deeper question: what if something goes wrong? Understanding how fear shapes our decisions is essential because the choices we make repeatedly form the path of our lives. Most people believe they make decisions primarily through logic and careful thinking. While reasoning certainly plays a role, research in psychology has shown that emotions strongly influence decision-making. Fear, in particular, has a remarkable ability to shape behavior. When the brain perceives a potential threat, it activates protective mechanisms designed to keep us safe. The heart rate increases, attention narrows, and the mind quickly searches for ways to avoid danger. In ancient environments, this response was essential. Fear helped humans avoid predators, dangerous terrain, and life-threatening situations. However, the modern world presents a different kind of threat: social rejection, financial uncertainty, criticism, or embarrassment. These situations are rarely life-threatening, but the brain reacts to them in a surprisingly similar way. The result is that fear often encourages avoidance rather than exploration. One of the most common ways fear shapes decisions is by pushing people towards safety. When faced with a choice between a secure option and an uncertain opportunity, the mind naturally prefers the familiar path. Even if the safer option offers limited growth, it feels comfortable because it carries fewer visible risks. Imagine a person who has an idea for a business. They feel excited at first, imagining the possibilities. But soon fear begins to speak. What if the business fails? What if you lose money? What will people say if it doesn't work? Gradually, the excitement fades and the idea is placed aside. The person continues with the routine they already know. From the outside, the decision may appear responsible, but inside, fear has quietly influenced the outcome. This pattern happens repeatedly in many areas of life: career choices, relationships, creative pursuits, and personal development. Another powerful force related to fear is loss aversion, the tendency to fear losing something more than we value gaining something new. Psychologists have discovered that people often feel the pain of loss about twice as strongly as the pleasure of gain. For example, losing $100 usually feels worse than gaining $100 feels good. Because of this imbalance, fear of loss strongly influences decision-making. People hesitate to take risks even when the potential rewards are significant. This can be seen in many everyday situations. An employee avoids asking for a promotion because they fear rejection. An investor avoids opportunities because they fear financial loss. An artist avoids sharing their work because they fear criticism. In each case, the fear of losing something, status, money, reputation, or comfort, becomes stronger than the possibility of gaining something better. Fear also strengthens the power of the comfort zone. The comfort zone is not necessarily a place of happiness. It is simply a place of familiarity. The brain prefers what it already understands because predictable environments require less mental energy. When a decision involves stepping into unfamiliar territory, fear often responds immediately. What if you cannot handle it? What if it becomes too difficult? What if things become worse instead of better? These thoughts create hesitation. Even when a person is dissatisfied with their current situation, The fear of the unknown may keep them from making a change. This explains why people often remain in jobs they dislike, delay pursuing meaningful goals, or postpone important life decisions for years. The familiar may not be ideal, but it feels safer than uncertainty. Another powerful influence on decision-making is the fear of being judged by others. Humans are deeply social creatures. Throughout history, belonging to a group increased chances of survival. Being rejected by the community could mean isolation and vulnerability. Although modern society is very different, the psychological importance of social acceptance remains strong. Because of this, many decisions are shaped by the imagined opinions of others. A student may choose a career path that pleases family expectations rather than following their true interest. An entrepreneur may hesitate to launch a new idea because they fear public failure. A person may remain silent in meetings because they worry their ideas will be criticized. The irony is that most people are far less focused on judging others than we assume. Everyone is largely occupied with their own concerns. Yet the imagined judgment of others can still hold tremendous power over our choices. Fear also encourages decisions that provide immediate relief rather than long-term benefit. When a situation feels uncomfortable, the brain looks for the fastest way to remove the discomfort. This often leads to avoidance. For example, someone who fears failure might delay starting an important project. By postponing the task, they temporarily escape the anxiety associated with it. But the problem does not disappear. It simply returns later, often with greater pressure. This cycle explains many forms of procrastination. The mind chooses short-term comfort over long-term progress. Unfortunately, repeated avoidance strengthens fear rather than reducing it. Sometimes fear influences decisions by creating the illusion that avoiding risk provides complete safety. People may believe that by staying in their current situation, they are protecting themselves from failure. However, avoiding risk does not eliminate uncertainty. It simply changes its form. A person who avoids starting a business may still face job insecurity later. Someone who avoids pursuing a dream may later experience regret. Life itself is uncertain. Every path contains risk. The difference is that some risks lead to growth and possibility, while others lead to stagnation. Fear also plays a significant role in limiting creativity and innovation. Creative thinking requires experimentation, curiosity, and a willingness to make mistakes. Yet fear of failure or criticism can prevent people from exploring new ideas. In workplaces, employees may hesitate to suggest unconventional solutions because they fear appearing foolish. In artistic fields, creators may hesitate to experiment because they fear their work will not be accepted. Even in everyday life, fear can suppress imagination. Instead of asking what could be possible, the mind asks what could go wrong. When fear dominates thinking, creativity shrinks. One of the most important steps toward overcoming fear's influence is learning to recognize when it is shaping a decision. Fear-based decisions often share certain characteristics. They focus primarily on avoiding negative outcomes rather than pursuing positive possibilities. They prioritize immediate comfort over long-term growth. They are often accompanied by excessive what-if scenarios. For example, someone might decline an opportunity by saying, "It's probably not the right time." While this may sometimes be true, it can also be a subtle way of masking fear. Asking honest questions can reveal the true motivation behind a decision. Am I choosing this because it aligns with my goals or because I am afraid of the alternative? This simple reflection can be surprisingly powerful. It is important to recognize that fear is not always harmful. In many situations, it provides useful information about potential risks. The goal is not to eliminate fear entirely, but to balance it with rational thinking. Before making an important decision, it can be helpful to examine both sides clearly. What are the real risks involved? What are the potential rewards? What might happen if no action is taken? Often, the risk of inaction is just as significant as the risk of action. For instance, not pursuing education may limit future opportunities. Not building skills may lead to stagnation. Not taking chances may result in missed possibilities. Fear tends to exaggerate the dangers of action while ignoring the consequences of inaction. A balanced perspective brings these hidden factors into view. Overcoming fear in decision-making does not require dramatic changes overnight. Courage can be developed gradually through small choices. Each time a person chooses growth over comfort, they weaken the influence of fear. Speaking up in a meeting, trying a new skill, starting a small project, sharing an idea with others. These actions may seem minor, but they train the mind to respond differently to uncertainty. With each step, confidence grows. Eventually, decisions that once felt intimidating begin to feel manageable. Over time, the accumulation of courageous decisions can transform a person's life. One decision leads to new experiences. New experiences lead to new skills. New skills create new opportunities. What once seemed impossible gradually becomes achievable. The opposite is also true. A pattern of fear-based decisions can slowly narrow the possibilities available to a person. The difference between these two paths often comes down to a series of small choices made over many years. Perhaps the most important realization is that while fear may influence thoughts, it does not have to control decisions. The ability to pause, reflect, and choose intentionally is one of the greatest strengths of the human mind. Instead of automatically obeying fear, a person can ask, is this decision moving me closer to the life I want or further away from it? This question shifts attention from immediate emotions to long-term purpose. When decisions are guided by values and goals rather than fear alone, the path forward becomes clearer. Fear will always exist in some form. It is part of the human experience, but it does not have to determine the direction of a life. Every important journey, starting a career, building a business, creating art, forming meaningful relationships, contains moments of uncertainty. Those who move forward are not necessarily braver or more talented than others. They simply choose to act despite fear. They recognize that growth rarely happens inside the boundaries of complete safety, and with every decision that prioritizes possibility over fear, the invisible chains begin to loosen once again. The path to discipline, resilience, and success is not built by eliminating fear. It is built by learning to decide in spite of it. Chapter 4. Breaking the Habit of Overthinking. The human mind is designed to think, analyze, and solve problems. This ability has helped humanity build civilizations, create technology, and overcome countless challenges. Thinking allows us to plan for the future, learn from the past, and make informed decisions. However, there is a point where thinking stops being helpful and begins to work against us. When thoughts become repetitive, excessive, and unproductive, they turn into something far less useful: overthinking. Overthinking is one of the most common mental habits that strengthens fear and doubt. It traps people in endless cycles of analysis, hesitation, and second-guessing. Instead of leading to clarity, it often creates confusion and paralysis. Many opportunities are not lost because people lack intelligence or ability. They are lost because people spend so much time thinking that they never begin. Overthinking is not simply thinking carefully about a situation. Careful thought can be helpful and necessary. Overthinking occurs when the mind repeatedly analyzes the same situation without moving toward a decision or action. The mind circles around the same questions again and again. What if this goes wrong? What if people judge me? What if I make the wrong choice? Each thought leads to another possibility, another scenario, another imagined problem. The brain keeps searching for the perfect answer, the perfect plan, or the perfect moment. But perfection rarely exists. Instead of reaching a conclusion, the mind becomes stuck in an endless loop of uncertainty. Overthinking is often driven by the desire to avoid mistakes. The brain believes that if it analyzes a situation long enough, it can predict every outcome and prevent every possible problem. In theory, this sounds logical. In reality, it is impossible. Life contains too many variables to predict perfectly. No amount of thinking can eliminate uncertainty. Another reason people overthink is the fear of judgment. When a decision involves other people's opinions, the mind tries to imagine every possible reaction. What will they think? What if they criticize me? What if they disagree? These questions multiply quickly, turning a simple decision into a complicated mental puzzle. Past experiences can also fuel overthinking. If someone has made a mistake before and felt embarrassed or disappointed, the brain becomes determined to prevent that feeling from happening again. As a result, it analyzes future situations excessively in an attempt to avoid repeating the same error. Ironically, this effort to avoid mistakes often prevents progress altogether. Overthinking creates a strange paradox. At first, thinking feels productive. It gives the illusion of progress. You feel as though you are preparing, planning, and being responsible. But after a certain point, thinking stops producing new insights. Instead, it begins repeating the same ideas in slightly different forms. The mind replays past conversations. It imagines future problems. It reviews the same decision again and again. Hours or days may pass without any real movement forward. In this state, thinking becomes a substitute for action. The mind convinces itself that more analysis is necessary before taking the next step, even when enough information already exists. Overthinking and fear often reinforce each other. Fear introduces a potential threat. Something might go wrong. Overthinking then expands that fear by creating detailed scenarios of what could happen if things fail. The mind imagines embarrassment, financial loss, criticism, rejection, and countless other possibilities. Each imagined outcome increases hesitation. Instead of helping to solve the problem, the mind magnifies it. This is why overthinking often appears when a person is about to make an important decision or take a meaningful step forward. The more important the action feels, the louder the cycle of thought becomes. Another hidden cost of overthinking is mental exhaustion. The brain consumes a significant amount of energy when processing complex thoughts. When the mind repeatedly analyzes the same situation, it wastes energy that could be used for creativity, productivity, or problem solving. Over time, this constant mental activity creates fatigue. People who overthink often feel mentally drained even when they have accomplished very little. They may spend hours worrying about a decision without actually making it. This exhaustion can lead to frustration and self-doubt. The person may begin to believe that they lack discipline or motivation, when in reality they have simply been trapped in excessive thinking. One of the biggest drivers of overthinking is the belief that there is a perfect decision. People imagine that if they think carefully enough, they will discover the one flawless choice that guarantees success and eliminates all risk. But most decisions in life do not work that way. In many situations, there are multiple paths that could lead to positive outcomes. Success often depends less on choosing the perfect option and more on committing fully to whichever option is chosen. Waiting for absolute certainty can delay action indefinitely. The truth is that clarity often appears after action begins, not before. Overthinking has a subtle but powerful consequence: delay. When decisions are postponed repeatedly, opportunities can disappear, time passes, circumstances change, and the moment that once existed may no longer be available. A person who spends years thinking about starting a project may eventually realize that others have already moved forward with similar ideas. A person who spends too long analyzing a career change may miss valuable opportunities for growth. While careful consideration is important, excessive delay can quietly limit potential. Life continues moving whether decisions are made or not. Breaking the habit of overthinking begins with awareness. There are several signs that thinking has crossed the line into overthinking. You replay the same situation in your mind repeatedly without reaching a conclusion. You imagine worst-case scenarios more often than realistic ones. You seek constant reassurance from others before making a decision. You feel mentally exhausted even though little action has taken place. When these patterns appear, it is a signal that the mind may be stuck in analysis rather than moving toward progress. One of the most effective ways to stop overthinking is to introduce action into the process. Action interrupts the cycle of speculation. It replaces imagined outcomes with real experience. Instead of asking endless what-if questions, the mind begins to receive feedback from reality. For example, someone who wants to start writing may spend weeks wondering if their work will be good enough. The moment they begin writing, however, the focus shifts from worrying about quality to improving the actual content. Action transforms uncertainty into information. Even small steps can be powerful. Making a phone call, sending an email, writing the first paragraph, or testing a simple idea can break the momentum of overthinking. Another helpful strategy is to set time limits for decision-making. Without a deadline, the mind can continue analyzing indefinitely. By giving yourself a specific period to evaluate options, whether it is an hour, a day, or a week, you create a clear boundary for thinking. Once that time expires, a decision must be made with the information available. This approach encourages focused thinking rather than endless speculation. It also trains the mind to become comfortable with uncertainty. 1. Many people overthink because they fear making mistakes. But mistakes are not only unavoidable, they are often necessary for learning. Every successful individual has made decisions that did not work out as expected. The difference is that they viewed those experiences as lessons rather than permanent failures. When mistakes are seen as part of growth, the pressure to make perfect decisions decreases. Instead of trying to eliminate every possible error, the focus shifts to learning and improving. This mindset makes action far easier. Breaking the habit of overthinking also requires mental discipline. Just as physical habits develop through repetition, mental habits follow similar patterns. If the mind has spent years engaging in excessive analysis, it may take time to change that behavior. Practicing awareness is an important step. When you notice yourself entering a cycle of repetitive thoughts, gently redirect your attention toward something productive. Ask yourself a simple question. What is the next small action I can take right now? Focusing on the next step rather than the entire journey makes progress feel manageable. Another powerful shift occurs when people begin trusting their ability to adapt. Many fears about decision-making assume that a single mistake will permanently damage the future. In reality, humans are remarkably capable of adjusting to new situations. If a plan does not work, it can often be revised. If a mistake occurs, new strategies can be developed. Life is rarely determined by a single decision. It is shaped by continuous learning and adaptation. Recognizing this truth reduces the pressure that fuels overthinking. At some point, every person must learn to act with incomplete information. Waiting for total certainty often means waiting forever. Progress belongs to those who are willing to move forward with imperfect clarity. They gather the best information available, consider their values and goals, and then take the next step. Once movement begins, new insights appear. What once seemed complicated becomes clearer through experience. When overthinking loses its grip, the mind becomes lighter and more focused. Energy that was once spent on endless analysis becomes available for creativity, productivity, and meaningful action. Decisions become simpler, progress becomes faster, confidence gradually increases. This does not mean that thoughtful planning disappears. Instead, thinking becomes purposeful rather than repetitive. The mind learns to analyze when necessary and act when the time arrives. Breaking the habit of overthinking is not about becoming careless or impulsive. It is about finding balance between reflection and action. Thinking should guide movement, not replace it. The most meaningful achievements in life, building a career, creating something valuable, developing strong relationships, require both thoughtful planning and courageous action. When overthinking is replaced with intentional action, fear begins to lose its power. And once the mind is free from the endless cycle of doubt and hesitation, a new path becomes visible, one defined not by hesitation, but by progress. Chapter 5. Building Courage, One Step at a Time. Courage is often misunderstood. Many people imagine courage as a dramatic act, someone standing fearlessly in the face of danger, making bold decisions without hesitation, or achieving something extraordinary despite overwhelming odds. While these moments certainly exist, true courage rarely appears in such dramatic ways. In everyday life, courage is much quieter. It shows up in small decisions, simple actions, and gradual steps forward. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to move forward even when fear is present. For most people, courage does not appear suddenly. It is built slowly, one step at a time. Many individuals believe that courageous people are somehow different from everyone else. They assume that confident leaders, successful entrepreneurs, or skilled performers simply do not feel fear. In reality, this assumption is rarely true. People who appear confident often feel the same doubts and anxieties that others experience. The difference is not that they are fearless, but that they have learned how to act despite fear. They understand that waiting for fear to disappear may mean waiting forever. Instead of seeking perfect confidence, they take action while fear is still present. Over time, this repeated action gradually strengthens courage. Just like any other ability, courage can be developed through practice. When someone first attempts something unfamiliar, fear tends to be strong. The mind focuses on potential risks, imagined embarrassment, and uncertain outcomes. But with each attempt, the brain gathers new evidence. It begins to learn that the situation is not as dangerous as it initially seemed. For example, someone who fears public speaking may feel intense anxiety the first time they present in front of an audience. Their heart races, their voice trembles, and their thoughts feel scattered. However, if they continue speaking in front of people again and again, something interesting happens. The fear gradually decreases. The brain becomes familiar with the experience. What once felt terrifying slowly becomes manageable. This process demonstrates a powerful truth. Courage grows through repetition. One of the most effective ways to build courage is through small, manageable actions. Many people hesitate to pursue goals because the end result appears overwhelming. Starting a business, changing careers, writing a book, or learning a new skill can feel like enormous challenges. When the mind focuses only on the final outcome, fear becomes stronger, but progress rarely happens all at once. Large achievements are usually built from a series of small steps taken consistently over time. A writer begins with a single page, an athlete begins with a single workout, an entrepreneur begins with a single idea. Each small action creates momentum. These small victories also provide psychological reinforcement. When the brain experiences success, even in small forms, it begins to associate action with progress rather than danger. Gradually, confidence grows. Courage and action create a powerful cycle. Action produces experience. Experience builds confidence. Confidence makes future action easier. At the beginning of this cycle, action requires effort. Fear may still be strong, and motivation may fluctuate, but once momentum begins, the process becomes smoother. A person who once struggled to speak in meetings may eventually feel comfortable sharing ideas. Someone who once feared failure may eventually view mistakes as valuable lessons. Momentum changes perception. Instead of seeing challenges as threats, the mind begins to see them as opportunities to grow. Another important step in building courage is learning to reinterpret fear. Fear is often viewed as a signal to stop. When the heart beats faster and the mind becomes tense, Many people assume that the situation must be avoided, but fear can also be interpreted differently. In many cases, fear appears when something meaningful is at stake. It signals that the situation matters, that the outcome is important enough to trigger a strong emotional response. Athletes often feel nervous before competitions. Artists feel anxious before presenting their work. Entrepreneurs feel uncertain before launching new ideas. These emotions do not mean that the action should be avoided. Instead, they indicate that the moment carries significance. By reframing fear as a natural response to meaningful challenges, people can learn to move forward rather than retreat. Growth rarely happens inside the comfort zone. The comfort zone consists of familiar routines, predictable situations, and activities that require little effort or risk. While this environment feels safe, it also limits development. Courage grows when people step slightly beyond this boundary. This does not mean taking reckless risks or forcing dramatic change overnight. Instead, it involves gradually expanding the range of experiences that feel manageable. For example, someone who feels uncomfortable speaking in front of large audiences might begin by sharing ideas in small group discussions. Later, they might present in slightly larger settings. Each experience stretches the comfort zone a little further. Over time, what once felt intimidating becomes part of normal life. One of the greatest obstacles to courage is the fear of failure. Many people avoid challenges because they worry about making mistakes or experiencing embarrassment. They imagine failure as a final judgment on their abilities. But failure is rarely final. In reality, failure is often one of the most powerful teachers available. Every unsuccessful attempt provides information about what does not work. This information can be used to improve future strategies. Thomas Edison reportedly conducted thousands of experiments before successfully developing the electric light bulb. When asked about his repeated failures, he famously responded that he had not failed. He had simply discovered many ways that did not work. This perspective transforms failure from something to fear into something to learn from. As courage develops through action, an important psychological shift begins to occur. Instead of relying on external validation, approval from others, perfect results, or guaranteed success, confidence begins to come from within. The person who has faced challenges repeatedly begins to trust their ability to handle uncertainty. They recognize that even if things do not go perfectly, they are capable of adapting, learning, and trying again. This internal confidence is far more stable than confidence based on external circumstances. It allows people to pursue goals even when outcomes are uncertain. Courage is not only developed through major life decisions, it is also shaped by everyday habits. Small daily actions train the mind to respond differently to challenges. Waking up early to work on a goal, finishing a difficult task, having an honest conversation, or trying something new. All of these actions strengthen the habit of courage. Over time, these habits create a mindset that values progress over comfort. The person begins to see themselves differently, not as someone who avoids difficulty, but as someone who faces it. Identity plays a powerful role in behavior. When people begin to view themselves as courageous individuals, they naturally make choices that align with that identity. Building courage takes time. Many people become discouraged when they do not see immediate changes in their confidence. They may attempt something difficult once, feel uncomfortable, and conclude that they are not capable of improvement. But courage develops gradually. Each step may feel small, but those steps accumulate. What feels uncomfortable today may feel normal a few months later. Patience allows this process to unfold naturally. Instead of expecting instant transformation, focus on consistent effort. Another powerful tool for building courage is self-encouragement. The internal dialogue that people maintain with themselves has a significant influence on behavior. If the mind constantly repeats messages like, "I'm not good enough," or "I can't handle this," fear becomes stronger. But when people intentionally replace these messages with more supportive thoughts, their mindset begins to shift. Statements such as, "I can improve with practice," This challenge will help me grow. I may not succeed immediately, but I will learn. These thoughts encourage persistence rather than avoidance. The goal is not blind optimism, but constructive belief in one's ability to develop over time. Courage is not a destination that someone reaches once and then keeps forever. It is an ongoing process. New challenges will always appear, and each challenge may bring new fears. However, people who have developed courage through small steps approach these situations differently. Instead of feeling paralyzed, they recognize fear as part of the journey. They trust that the same process that helped them grow before will help them grow again. In the end, courage is rarely loud or dramatic. It is the student who asks a question, even when they feel uncertain. It is the employee who shares a new idea. It is the creator who publishes their work despite fear of criticism. It is the individual who chooses growth instead of comfort. These small acts may seem insignificant in isolation, but together they form the foundation of meaningful progress. Every courageous step weakens the power of fear. Every attempt builds experience, and over time, the person who once hesitated begins to move forward with greater confidence and determination. The path to resilience, discipline, and success is not built through a single moment of bravery. It is built through countless small decisions to move forward, one step at a time. Chapter 6: Rewiring Your Mind for Confidence. Confidence is often seen as a mysterious quality that some people naturally possess, while others do not. When we observe confident individuals, leaders speaking clearly, athletes performing under pressure, entrepreneurs taking bold risks, it can appear as though they were simply born that way. But confidence is rarely a natural gift. In most cases, it is the result of repeated experiences, learned beliefs, and mental habits developed over time. Just as fear and doubt can shape the way we think, confidence can also be built by gradually retraining the mind. This process is often described as rewiring the mind, changing patterns of thought so that courage, belief, and resilience become stronger than fear and hesitation. The human brain is far more adaptable than most people realize. With consistent effort, it can learn new patterns and replace old ones. For many years, scientists believed that the brain's structure was mostly fixed after childhood. According to this view, intelligence, personality, and emotional responses were largely predetermined. Modern neuroscience has revealed a very different picture. The brain is constantly changing through a process known as neuroplasticity. Every thought, experience, and action strengthens certain neural connections while weakening others. When a person repeatedly thinks fearful thoughts, the brain strengthens pathways associated with anxiety and avoidance. When a person repeatedly acts with confidence, the brain strengthens pathways associated with courage and control. In other words, the brain becomes better at whatever it practices most often. This means that confidence is not simply something you either have or do not have. It is something that can be trained. One of the most powerful influences on confidence is the pattern of thoughts that a person repeats daily. If someone constantly tells themselves, "I'm not good enough," "I always mess things up," "I can't handle challenges," the brain gradually accepts these statements as truth. These thoughts shape expectations, which then influence behavior. But the opposite is also true. When a person begins practicing more constructive thoughts such as, "I can learn from mistakes," "I am capable of improvement," "challenges help me grow," the brain begins forming new associations. At first, these new thoughts may feel unfamiliar or even unrealistic, but with repetition, they become more natural. Over time, the internal dialogue that once produced doubt begins to support confidence. While thoughts play a significant role, confidence grows even faster through experience. Every time a person successfully completes a difficult task, their brain stores evidence that they are capable of handling challenges. Even small accomplishments contribute to this process. Completing a workout, finishing a project, speaking up in a meeting, learning a new skill. Each experience becomes proof that progress is possible. The brain gradually builds a library of positive experiences that counteract earlier doubts. This is why action is such a powerful tool for building confidence. Thinking about success can be helpful, but experiencing progress directly is far more convincing to the brain. Many people carry hidden beliefs that limit their confidence. These beliefs often develop early in life through past experiences, criticism, or repeated failures. Over time, they become deeply ingrained. A student who struggles in school may develop the belief that they are not intelligent. An employee who receives harsh criticism may begin to believe they are incapable of leadership. An artist whose work is rejected may conclude that they lack talent. These beliefs become mental filters. When new opportunities appear, the mind interprets them through these old assumptions. Rewiring the mind involves questioning and replacing these limiting beliefs. Instead of accepting them as permanent truths, it is helpful to ask, is this belief based on evidence, or is it based on past experiences that may no longer define me? Often, people discover that their beliefs are far more restrictive than reality. By replacing limiting beliefs with more empowering ones, the mind begins to interpret challenges differently. Another technique that helps rewire the mind is visualization. Visualization involves mentally rehearsing a desired outcome before it happens. Athletes, performers, and leaders frequently use this technique to prepare for important moments. When the brain vividly imagines a successful experience, it activates many of the same neural pathways that are involved in the real activity. For example, a person preparing for a presentation might imagine themselves speaking clearly, answering questions confidently, and finishing with a sense of accomplishment. This mental rehearsal reduces anxiety and makes the actual experience feel more familiar. While visualization alone cannot replace real effort, it can prepare the mind to perform more effectively. Confidence is also shaped by the environment in which a person spends their time. Surrounding yourself with supportive, encouraging individuals can strengthen belief in your abilities. Positive environments provide feedback, motivation, and opportunities for growth. On the other hand, environments filled with constant criticism or negativity can weaken confidence over time. This does not mean avoiding all criticism. Constructive feedback is essential for improvement. But there is a difference between guidance that helps someone grow and negativity that simply discourages effort. Choosing environments that encourage learning and experimentation makes it easier for confidence to develop. Interestingly, confidence is not only influenced by thoughts, it is also influenced by physical behavior. The way a person stands, walks, and speaks can affect how they feel internally. When someone slouches, avoids eye contact, and speaks quietly, their brain often interprets these signals as signs of insecurity. But when someone stands upright, maintains eye contact, and speaks clearly, the brain receives signals associated with confidence. Researchers have found that adopting confident body language, even temporarily, can influence emotional state. By practicing strong posture and deliberate movement, people can reinforce a more confident mindset. Confidence grows when positive behaviors become habits. Instead of relying on occasional bursts of motivation, successful individuals often create daily routines that reinforce discipline and self-belief. Regular exercise strengthens both physical and mental resilience. Consistent learning builds knowledge and competence. Completing tasks on schedule builds reliability and self-trust. Each habit contributes to a sense of control over one's life. When a person repeatedly proves to themselves that they can follow through on commitments, confidence naturally increases. No process of growth is free from setbacks. Even people who have developed strong confidence will occasionally experience failures, criticism, or unexpected difficulties. The difference lies in how these situations are interpreted. A person with a fixed mindset may see a setback as proof that they lack ability. A person with a growth-oriented mindset views setbacks as temporary obstacles or learning experiences. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" They ask, "What can I learn from this?" This perspective protects confidence during difficult moments. It allows individuals to continue moving forward rather than becoming discouraged. Unin opbilend förd in wilthna mind does not happen instantly. Old patterns of thought may return occasionally, especially during stressful situations. Doubt and fear are deeply rooted mental habits that take time to replace. However, consistent effort gradually shifts the balance. Each positive thought, each courageous action, and each completed goal strengthens the pathways associated with confidence. Over time, these new patterns become stronger than the old ones. The mind begins to respond to challenges with curiosity rather than fear. Perhaps the most powerful transformation occurs when confidence becomes part of a person's identity. At first, individuals may simply practice confident behaviors, but as experiences accumulate, they begin to see themselves differently. Instead of thinking, "I'm trying to be more confident," they begin thinking, "I am someone who can handle challenges." This shift in identity changes the way decisions are made. Opportunities are approached with greater willingness, and setbacks are viewed with greater resilience. Confidence becomes less about forcing bravery and more about trusting one's ability to adapt. Rewiring the mind for confidence ultimately creates a new mental framework. Fear still exists, but it no longer dominates decision-making. Doubt may appear, but it is balanced by evidence of past progress. Challenges are no longer seen as threats to avoid, but as opportunities to grow. Through repeated practice, the brain learns a new pattern, one that supports discipline, persistence, and self-belief. And as this new pattern strengthens, the invisible chains that once held the mind back begin to fade. Confidence is no longer something distant or unattainable. It becomes a natural result of a mind that has been trained to believe in its own ability to move forward. Joint fitum de billy eni under thing woodia. Chapter 7. Facing Failure Without Fear. Few words carry as much emotional weight as the word failure. For many people, the idea of failing triggers deep discomfort, embarrassment, or even shame. From a young age, failure is often portrayed as something to avoid at all costs. Students are rewarded for correct answers and punished for mistakes. Employees are praised for success but criticized for errors. Society frequently celebrates winners while quietly ignoring the long journeys that led to their achievements. Because of this, many people grow up believing that failure is something negative, something that should be hidden or feared. Yet the reality of growth tells a very different story. Failure is not the opposite of success. In many cases, it is an essential part of the path that leads to it. Learning how to face failure without fear is one of the most important mental shifts a person can make. The fear of failure is powerful because it touches several deep human concerns. People fear losing respect from others. They fear feeling embarrassed or inadequate. They fear wasting time, money, or effort. These fears can be so strong that many individuals prefer not to try at all. Avoiding action feels safer than risking disappointment. This is why talented people sometimes hold themselves back. They avoid opportunities that could reveal their true potential because they worry about what might happen if things do not work out. Ironically, this avoidance creates a different kind of failure, the failure to try. One of the reasons failure is so painful is that people often interpret it as a reflection of their identity. When a project does not succeed, the mind may quickly jump to conclusions. I failed, so I must not be capable. This didn't work, so I'm not good enough. This type of thinking connects the outcome of a single event to the value of the person involved. But failure is rarely that simple. Most failures occur because of strategy, timing, lack of information, or circumstances beyond one's control. Not because a person lacks intelligence or potential. Separating identity from outcomes is a crucial step toward building resilience. When we observe successful individuals, we often see only the final result. We see the thriving company, the best-selling book, the award-winning performance. What we rarely see are the countless setbacks, rejected ideas, and difficult moments that occurred along the way. Many well-known achievements were preceded by multiple failures. Businesses that eventually succeeded often began with unsuccessful attempts. Writers who published best-selling books often faced repeated rejections. Inventors who created revolutionary products conducted countless experiments that did not work. These failures were not signs that success was impossible. They were steps in the learning process. Understanding this truth helps shift the perception of failure from something shameful to something instructive. One of the most useful ways to view failure is as feedback. When something does not work as expected, it provides valuable information. It reveals weaknesses in a plan, gaps in knowledge, or areas where improvement is needed. In this sense, failure functions like a teacher. Imagine trying to solve a complex puzzle. Each incorrect attempt brings you closer to understanding how the pieces fit together. The process may involve trial and error, but each step reveals something new. The same principle applies to life. Every failed attempt contains lessons that can guide future efforts. The key is to analyze the experience objectively rather than reacting emotionally. Avoiding failure might feel safe in the short term, but it carries a hidden cost. When people avoid challenges, they also avoid the opportunities that come with them. Someone who never applies for a competitive job may never experience rejection, but they also miss the possibility of advancement. Someone who never shares their creative work may never receive criticism, but they also miss the chance to inspire others. Over time, this pattern of avoidance can quietly limit a person's potential. The desire to avoid failure can lead to a life defined by caution rather than growth. Facing failure without fear requires emotional resilience, the ability to recover from setbacks and continue moving forward. Resilience does not mean ignoring disappointment. Feeling frustrated or discouraged after a failure is natural. What matters is how long those feelings last and how they influence future decisions. Resilient individuals allow themselves to acknowledge the disappointment, but they do not allow it to define them. Instead of dwelling on the failure itself, they focus on the next step. What can I learn from this? What can I improve next time? These questions transform failure from a stopping point into a learning opportunity. Persistence is one of the most powerful traits connected to success. Many goals require sustained effort over long periods of time. Obstacles, mistakes, and unexpected challenges are almost guaranteed along the way. Without persistence, even small setbacks can derail progress. With persistence, however, setbacks become temporary obstacles rather than permanent barriers. A person who continues improving after each failure eventually develops skills, knowledge, and strategies that increase the chances of success. Persistence turns failure into progress. Another important step in overcoming fear of failure is redefining what failure actually means. Failure does not have to mean that an attempt was worthless. A failed project may still build valuable experience. An unsuccessful business idea may still teach important lessons about markets and strategy. A rejected proposal may still help refine future ideas. When viewed from this perspective, failure becomes part of a longer journey rather than a final judgment. This mindset encourages experimentation and creativity. Instead of fearing mistakes, people become willing to explore new approaches and take calculated risks. People are often far harsher toward themselves than they would be toward others. If a friend experiences failure, most people respond with encouragement and understanding. They recognize that mistakes are part of life. Yet when they themselves fail, the internal dialogue may become critical and unforgiving. Learning to practice self-compassion can help break this pattern. Self-compassion does not mean ignoring responsibility or avoiding improvement. It simply means treating yourself with the same patience and understanding you would offer someone else. By reducing harsh self-criticism, individuals create a mental environment where growth is possible. Perhaps the most important response to failure is the willingness to try again. Each new attempt carries the lessons of previous experiences. Strategies become more refined, mistakes become less frequent, and confidence gradually increases. The first attempt may fail, the second attempt may struggle, but each attempt builds momentum. Success often belongs to those who are willing to continue when others stop. Facing failure without fear does not mean eliminating the emotional impact of setbacks. Instead, it means recognizing that those setbacks do not define the future. Every person who has achieved something meaningful has encountered moments when things did not go as planned. What separates those who succeed from those who give up is not the absence of failure. It is the response to it. Courage is not only about trying something difficult. Sometimes courage is simply the decision to stand up again after falling. When the fear of failure begins to fade, something remarkable happens. People become more willing to experiment, explore, and pursue ambitious goals. Creativity expands. Confidence grows. Instead of constantly protecting themselves from possible mistakes, individuals begin focusing on what they can build, create, and achieve. The energy once spent on avoiding failure becomes energy invested in progress. Failure will always remain a possibility in any meaningful pursuit, but when its power over the mind diminishes, the path forward becomes much clearer. Challenges become opportunities to learn. Mistakes become tools for improvement. Setbacks become temporary detours rather than permanent endings. The journey toward discipline, resilience, and success is not free from failure. In fact, failure often marks the points where the most important lessons are learned. And when a person learns to face those moments without fear, they unlock a powerful freedom. The freedom to keep moving forward, no matter what obstacles appear along the way. Chapter 8. Turning Fear into Personal Power. Fear is often seen as something negative, an emotion that weakens confidence, blocks opportunities, and limits human potential. Many people spend much of their lives trying to avoid fear completely, but fear itself is not the true problem. Fear is simply energy. It is a powerful emotional signal produced by the brain to alert us to something important. The real question is not whether fear exists, but how we respond to it. When fear controls our decisions, it becomes a barrier, but when we learn to use it differently, fear can become a powerful source of motivation and strength. The same emotion that once created hesitation can eventually fuel growth, courage, and determination. Learning to transform fear into personal power is one of the most important psychological skills a person can develop. Fear activates the body in powerful ways. When the brain detects a potential threat, it triggers the release of stress hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. These chemicals increase heart rate, sharpen attention, and prepare the body for action. This response was designed to help humans survive dangerous situations. In ancient environments, fear helped people react quickly when facing predators or other physical threats. In modern life, however, many fears are not about physical survival. Instead, they are related to social or psychological situations. Public speaking, career changes, financial risks, or personal goals. Although the nature of the threat has changed, the body still responds with the same surge of energy. This means that fear produces a powerful state of heightened awareness and readiness. When directed properly, this energy can improve performance and focus. The key is learning how to channel the energy of fear instead of resisting it. Fear does not always lead to paralysis. In many situations, it can actually increase motivation. Consider athletes before a major competition. Most of them feel nervous before stepping onto the field or stage. Their heart rate increases, their senses sharpen, and their focus intensifies. Instead of interpreting these sensations as weakness, they understand them as signs that their body is preparing for performance. The same principle can apply to everyday challenges. The nervous energy before an important presentation can sharpen concentration. The uncertainty before launching a new project can increase preparation and attention to detail. Fear becomes destructive only when it leads to avoidance. When fear leads to action, it becomes a powerful ally. One of the most effective ways to turn fear into power is by changing the way it is interpreted. Many people automatically view fear as a warning that they should stop or retreat, but fear can also be seen as an indicator that something meaningful is about to happen. If a goal feels important, it is natural to feel some level of anxiety. The brain recognizes that the outcome matters, and it responds by preparing the body for effort. By reframing fear in this way, the emotional experience begins to change. Instead of thinking, "I'm afraid, so I shouldn't do this," a person can think, "I'm afraid because this matters." This shift transforms fear from a signal to retreat into a signal to prepare. Fear often reveals what we care about most. A person who fears failure in their career likely values success and personal achievement. Someone who fears rejection in relationships likely values connection and belonging. Instead of trying to eliminate fear entirely, it can be helpful to ask, what is this fear telling me about what matters to me? This question turns fear into a guide. If something triggers fear, it may also be pointing toward an area where growth is possible. Many of the goals that lead to personal development, starting a business, learning a new skill, speaking publicly, or pursuing a creative dream, initially produce fear. Rather than avoiding these feelings, successful individuals often use them as motivation to prepare, improve, and move forward. Turning fear into power also requires learning to manage emotional responses. When fear first appears, the body reacts automatically, the heart beats faster, breathing becomes shallow, and thoughts may become scattered. However, these reactions can be regulated with simple techniques. Slow, deep breathing helps calm the nervous system. Pausing to observe thoughts can reduce mental chaos. Focusing on the next specific action can restore clarity. These small steps allow the rational part of the brain to regain control. Once calmness returns, fear can be analyzed more objectively. Is the threat real or exaggerated? What is the worst realistic outcome? What steps can reduce the risk? By approaching fear with curiosity rather than panic, people transform it into useful information. Another powerful method for turning fear into strength is gradual exposure. Avoiding fear tends to make it stronger. Each time a situation is avoided, the brain interprets the avoidance as confirmation that the situation is dangerous. But when people face their fears gradually, the brain begins to update its understanding. For example, someone who fears public speaking may start by speaking in small groups. After gaining comfort, they may move on to larger audiences. Each successful experience weakens the intensity of the fear. Eventually, the situation that once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. This process transforms fear into confidence. Many of the most meaningful experiences in life involve stepping into unfamiliar territory. Learning a new skill, changing careers, forming relationships, or pursuing ambitious goals all involve uncertainty. Because the brain prefers familiarity, it often responds to these situations with fear. But this reaction can also be interpreted as a sign of progress. If something feels slightly uncomfortable, it may mean that you are expanding your abilities. Athletes experience muscle discomfort when training intensely. Students experience mental strain when learning difficult subjects. In both cases, discomfort signals that development is taking place. Similarly, emotional discomfort often accompanies personal growth. Some individuals use fear as fuel for determination. When faced with doubt, either from themselves or from others, they channel that energy into focused effort. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" they ask, "What can I do to improve my chances of success?" This shift changes the direction of attention. Fear no longer dominates the mind. Instead, it becomes a reminder to prepare more carefully, practice more consistently, and pursue goals with greater commitment. Over time, this mindset creates powerful motivation. Turning fear into personal power requires the development of a resilient mindset. A resilient mindset includes several key beliefs. Challenges are opportunities for learning. Mistakes are temporary, not permanent failures. Effort leads to improvement over time. These beliefs allow individuals to face fear without becoming overwhelmed by it. When the mind accepts that difficulties are part of progress, fear becomes less threatening. One of the greatest rewards of confronting fear is the confidence that follows. Each time a person does something that once seemed intimidating, they gain evidence of their own capability. A difficult conversation that once seemed impossible becomes manageable. A challenging project becomes achievable. A risky decision becomes a valuable experience. These moments accumulate, gradually transforming self-perception. Instead of seeing themselves as someone who avoids challenges, individuals begin to see themselves as someone who faces them. This identity shift is powerful. Confidence becomes rooted in real experiences rather than imagined abilities. When fear is no longer seen as an enemy, it loses much of its control. Challenges still produce nervousness, but they also produce excitement and curiosity. Life becomes less about avoiding discomfort and more about exploring possibilities. This freedom allows individuals to pursue goals that once seemed beyond their reach. They become more willing to try, experiment, and learn. Fear still exists, but it no longer dictates the limits of their actions. The transformation of fear into personal power is not an instant process. It develops through repeated experiences of facing uncertainty and moving forward anyway. Each time fear is confronted rather than avoided, the mind becomes stronger. Each time courage replaces hesitation, the sense of personal capability expands. Over time, the emotion that once created hesitation becomes a source of focus and determination. Fear does not disappear, but it changes form. It becomes a signal that growth is near, that opportunity is present, and that the next step forward may lead to something meaningful. And when a person learns to use fear in this way, it becomes one of the greatest sources of personal power available to the human mind. Chapter 9. Living with Boldness and Self-Belief. Every meaningful life is shaped by a series of decisions. Some decisions are small and routine, while others carry the power to change the direction of a person's future. The difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one often lies not in talent or intelligence, but in the courage to act boldly and the belief that one's efforts can lead to meaningful outcomes. Boldness and self-belief are not traits reserved for a special group of people. They are attitudes that can be developed through experience, discipline, and the willingness to trust one's own potential. Living with boldness does not mean acting recklessly or ignoring risks. Instead, it means approaching life with the confidence that challenges can be faced, mistakes can be corrected, and growth is always possible. Boldness is often misunderstood as dramatic or extreme behavior. In reality, boldness is usually expressed in simple but powerful choices. It is the decision to pursue a dream that others consider unrealistic. It is the willingness to speak honestly about ideas and beliefs. It is the courage to take responsibility for shaping one's own life. Bold individuals do not wait endlessly for perfect conditions. They understand that uncertainty is a natural part of any meaningful endeavor. Instead of allowing fear to control their choices, they take thoughtful action even when outcomes are not guaranteed. Self-belief is the quiet confidence that you are capable of learning, improving, and overcoming obstacles. This belief does not require the assumption that everything will always succeed. Rather, it rests on the understanding that even when difficulties appear, you possess the ability to adapt and continue moving forward. Self-belief develops gradually. Each challenge faced, each mistake corrected, and each goal achieved adds evidence that personal growth is possible. Over time, these experiences strengthen trust in one's own abilities. The more evidence the mind collects, the stronger self-belief becomes. Many people struggle with self-belief because they rely too heavily on the approval of others. From an early age, individuals are often evaluated through grades, performance reviews, social opinions, and cultural expectations. While feedback can be useful, constant dependence on external validation can weaken confidence. When people rely entirely on the opinions of others, their sense of self-worth becomes unstable. Praise can create temporary confidence, while criticism can quickly destroy it. Living boldly requires shifting the source of confidence inward. Instead of asking, "What will others think?" the question becomes, "Does this align with my values and goals?" When decisions are guided by personal purpose rather than constant approval, individuals gain greater control over their own direction. Boldness also requires accepting responsibility. It is easy to blame circumstances, other people, or past experiences for the difficulties we face. While external factors certainly influence our lives, focusing entirely on them can lead to a sense of helplessness. Taking responsibility does not mean ignoring challenges or pretending that obstacles do not exist. It means recognizing that despite those obstacles, you still have the ability to make choices. You can choose how to respond to setbacks. You can choose how much effort to invest in your goals. You can choose whether to continue learning and growing. This mindset transforms individuals from passive observers of life into active participants. Bold individuals often see themselves as learners rather than as fixed personalities. Instead of defining themselves by past achievements or failures, they view identity as something flexible and evolving. A person who adopts a growth-focused identity might think, "I may not have mastered this skill yet, but I can improve through practice." This mindset encourages experimentation and exploration. When identity is flexible, mistakes become part of development rather than threats to self-worth. This perspective allows people to pursue ambitious goals without being paralyzed by the fear of imperfection. Living boldly also involves taking initiative. Many opportunities in life do not arrive automatically. They require someone to take the first step, to ask the question, start the project, propose the idea, or begin the journey. Waiting for permission or perfect certainty often leads to missed opportunities. Initiative, on the other hand, creates momentum. A single step can lead to new experiences, new connections, and unexpected possibilities. Even if the first attempt does not produce immediate success, it opens the door to learning and improvement. Over time, people who consistently take initiative often find themselves in positions where opportunities naturally increase. One of the most common barriers to boldness is the fear of judgment. People worry about criticism, rejection, or appearing inexperienced. This fear can lead to hesitation, silence, and missed chances to grow. However, the reality is that judgment from others is often far less significant than we imagine. Most people are focused on their own lives and challenges. The opinions that once seemed overwhelming often fade quickly as new events capture attention. Even when criticism does occur, it rarely defines a person's long-term potential. Learning to accept that some people may disagree or disapprove frees individuals from the need to please everyone. Boldness is not simply about taking risks. It is also about maintaining discipline. Pursuing meaningful goals requires consistent effort, patience, and resilience. Bold dreams must be supported by daily actions that move progress forward. An entrepreneur who launches a business must continue working even during difficult periods. A writer who begins a book must continue writing even when inspiration fades. An athlete who sets ambitious goals must train regularly despite fatigue. Boldness provides the vision, while discipline provides the structure needed to turn vision into reality. Together, they form a powerful combination. Self-belief grows when people begin trusting their own judgment. This does not mean ignoring advice or refusing feedback. Instead, it means recognizing that ultimately you are responsible for the direction of your life. Listening to others can provide valuable insights, but decisions must eventually be made by the person who will live with the consequences. Developing this trust takes time. It grows through experience, reflection, and learning from both successes and mistakes. Each decision, whether perfect or imperfect, adds to the understanding of what works and what does not. Gradually, Confidence in personal judgment becomes stronger. Boldness and self-belief become even more powerful when they are connected to a sense of purpose. Purpose provides direction. It answers the question of why certain goals matter. When people understand the deeper reasons behind their efforts, they are more willing to face challenges and persist through difficulties. Purpose transforms effort into something meaningful. Instead of simply chasing external rewards, individuals begin working toward goals that align with their values, passions, and vision for the future. Life rarely unfolds exactly as planned. Unexpected obstacles appear, plans change, and circumstances evolve. In these moments, boldness and self-belief become especially important. They provide the courage to adjust, learn, and continue moving forward. A bold person does not expect the path to be easy. Instead, they expect that challenges will appear, and they trust their ability to navigate them. This attitude transforms difficulties into opportunities for growth. When individuals begin living with boldness and self-belief, their perspective on life changes. Opportunities that once seemed intimidating begin to look exciting. Challenges become invitations to learn rather than threats to avoid. Instead of constantly protecting themselves from failure, people begin focusing on what they can create, build, and achieve. The boundaries that once seemed fixed begin to expand. This does not guarantee that every goal will succeed, but it ensures that life will be shaped by intention rather than hesitation. Every person carries untapped potential, ideas that have not yet been explored, talents that have not yet been developed, and ambitions that have not yet been pursued. Boldness and self-belief provide the courage to explore that potential. They encourage individuals to step beyond familiar limits and discover what they are truly capable of achieving. The journey toward confidence, discipline, and resilience ultimately leads to this realization: you are not defined by your fears, your past mistakes, or the expectations of others. You are defined by the choices you make and the actions you take. And when those choices are guided by boldness and self-belief, the possibilities for growth and achievement become far greater than you may have ever imagined. Chapter 10: Creating a Life Without Limits. Every human life is shaped by boundaries. Some of these limits are real: time, resources, physical conditions, and circumstances that exist outside our control. But many of the limits people live with are not external at all. They exist in the mind. Fear, doubt, overthinking, and the fear of failure often create invisible walls that restrict what people believe they can achieve. These mental barriers are powerful because they feel real, even when they are not. Throughout this journey, we have explored how fear influences thoughts, decisions, and actions. We have seen how doubt can weaken confidence, how overthinking can delay progress, and how fear of failure can prevent people from trying. But we have also discovered something equally important. These patterns can change. A life without limits does not mean a life without challenges. It means a life where the limits that once held you back no longer control your decisions. Many of the limitations people experience begin as beliefs. Someone might believe they are not talented enough to pursue a certain career. Another person might believe they are too old to learn something new. Someone else might believe that success belongs only to those with special advantages. These beliefs may appear logical, especially if they are reinforced by past experiences or the opinions of others. But beliefs are not permanent truths. They are interpretations, stories the mind tells itself to explain the world. When people begin questioning these stories, they often discover that their limits were never as fixed as they seemed. Creating a life without limits begins with expanding the definition of what is possible. History is filled with examples of individuals who achieved things once considered impossible. Technological breakthroughs, artistic revolutions, and social transformations often began with people who refused to accept the boundaries others believed were permanent. At the personal level, the same principle applies. The moment someone begins to challenge the assumptions that restrict them, new possibilities appear. A skill that once seemed difficult becomes learnable through practice. A goal that once seemed distant becomes reachable through consistent effort. Possibility grows when belief expands. One of the most powerful steps toward a limitless life is accepting ownership of your direction. While circumstances influence our starting points, they do not completely determine where we can go. Every day presents choices. You can choose whether to continue learning or remain comfortable with existing knowledge. You can choose whether to pursue meaningful goals or settle for routine. You can choose whether to respond to challenges with persistence or surrender to frustration. These choices accumulate over time. The life someone experiences 10 years from now is often shaped by the habits and decisions they make today. Ownership means recognizing that while you may not control everything that happens, you always control how you respond. Ambition alone is not enough to create a life without limits. Vision must be supported by discipline. Discipline is the ability to take consistent action even when motivation fluctuates. Many people feel inspired when imagining a new goal, but maintaining effort over time requires structure and commitment. Discipline transforms dreams into daily practice. A musician practices regularly, even when progress feels slow. A writer continues writing even when ideas feel difficult. An entrepreneur continues building despite setbacks. Through discipline, progress becomes steady rather than occasional. Great achievements rarely occur in a single dramatic moment. More often, they are the result of small actions repeated consistently over long periods. Each day of effort adds a small amount of progress. Each lesson learned improves skill and understanding. Over time, these small improvements accumulate into significant change. This principle is sometimes called the power of compounding. Just as small financial investments can grow into large sums over time, small personal improvements can grow into major transformations. A person who reads regularly gains knowledge. A person who practices consistently develops expertise. A person who persists through challenges builds resilience. Momentum turns effort into growth. Another important aspect of a limitless life is adaptability. The world is constantly changing. New technologies emerge, industries evolve, and unexpected events alter the course of plans. Individuals who succeed in such environments are not necessarily those who predict every change in advance. Instead, they are those who remain flexible and willing to learn. Adaptability allows people to respond creatively to new situations. When one path becomes difficult, they search for alternative routes. When new opportunities appear, they are willing to explore them. This openness to change keeps progress moving forward, even when circumstances shift. One even without limits also requires redefining success. Many people measure success purely through external achievements, money, status, or recognition. While these accomplishments can be rewarding, they do not always reflect personal fulfillment. True success often includes additional dimensions: growth as a person, contribution to others, meaningful experiences and relationships. When success is defined only by external outcomes, setbacks can feel devastating. But when success includes learning, improvement, and purposeful effort, every step forward becomes valuable. The comfort zone offers familiarity and security, but it can also create stagnation. Living without limits requires stepping beyond this zone repeatedly. This does not mean abandoning stability entirely. It means regularly challenging yourself to grow, trying new experiences, learning unfamiliar skills, and pursuing ambitious goals. All stretch personal boundaries. Each step outside the comfort zone expands the range of what feels possible. Over time, the zone of comfort grows larger. What once seemed intimidating becomes routine. A life lived boldly has influence beyond the individual. When people pursue their goals with courage and determination, they often inspire others to do the same. A parent who continues learning inspires children to value education. A leader who takes responsible risks encourages innovation. An individual who overcomes adversity reminds others that challenges can be faced. Personal growth creates ripples that extend outward into families, communities, and society. By refusing to accept unnecessary limits, one person can help others reconsider their own potential. Creating a life without limits is not a destination that someone reaches once and then remains forever. It is an ongoing journey. New challenges will appear, new fears will emerge, and new goals will replace old ones. But with each stage of growth, the individual becomes better equipped to face these experiences. Confidence grows through experience. Resilience strengthens through adversity. Vision expands through learning. The person who once struggled with fear gradually becomes someone who embraces possibility. At the center of this transformation lies a simple but powerful choice. You can allow fear, doubt, and hesitation to determine the boundaries of your life, or you can recognize those feelings, learn from them, and continue moving forward anyway. The difference between these two choices defines the difference between limitation and freedom. A life without limits does not promise perfection. It promises something far more valuable: the opportunity to explore your potential fully, to pursue meaningful goals, and to grow into the strongest version of yourself. Every journey begins with a single decision. The decision to believe that growth is possible. The decision to act despite uncertainty. The decision to refuse the limits that fear once imposed. With each step taken in this direction, the invisible chains that once held you back grow weaker, and eventually, you realize something extraordinary. The limits that once seemed permanent were never truly there. They existed only until the moment you chose to move beyond them.